shortly. Take one break, if people can sit down, we're going to make a start now. Welcome to this evening's meeting. My name is Helen Sam and I'll be chairing. We're very pleased to have Michael Albert here tonight. He's the editor of ZNet and the author of par1. And he's been, himself and Alex Callinicos have been conducting a debate of the internet recently people may have read, which will be continued tonight. The debate tonight is on Lenin today, and Michael Albert will be debating Alex, who's a member of the Socialist Workers' Party and the author of the New Mandarins of American Power. They'll speak each for around 15 to 20 minutes, and then we'll open the discussion to the floor so that you can have your chance to make your points, ask your questions. During the speakers, the team members will be going around with speaker slips. If you want to make a point or think of something you want to ask or say, just wave your hand and I'll give you one to fill in, which will be then handed to me, and then you'll be called to speak. So now I'd like to welcome first of all Alex Callinicos to speak.
Thanks very much. I think it's really great to have Michael here tonight, and indeed to have had him speak a number of times at Marxism, because I think that he's made a really important contribution to the development of the anti-capitalist and anti-war movements. And I think, in particular, his work, not simply all the things that ZNet do as a source of information, discussion, analysis and so on, for the left, not just in the United States, but internationally, but also Michael's own work in seeking to develop a realistic conception of a democratically planned economy is really important. You know, in the past, I remember chairing a meeting in which Michael spoke and saying to him afterwards that I was struck by just how far, to what a great extent that we agreed on a whole number of issues of principle and practice. However, there's a limit to that agreement. In the debate on ZNet that Helen referred to, Michael in his conclusion wrote this: "We agree on a lot. I feel that if we direct the conversation carefully over dinner, or in a congenial online debate, or even arm in arm in some struggle situation, we can have a delightful time. Yet I also fear, if we vary just a few words or make reference to certain historical epochs, all hell will break loose." Now, I think the reason for this fear has something to do with the topic of tonight's debate, namely Lenin. I think that this is the point at which I think I hope not hell may break loose, but a degree of disagreement will emerge. Let me make it clear, in discussing Lenin, I don't think that the point is to discuss Lenin the person. I think what we're discussing is Leninism, a particular way of doing socialist politics. Now, in that passage from Michael that I cited, he referred to history, and there's an enormous amount to be said about Lenin in his historical context, about the development of Bolshevism as a mass revolutionary party and later as an institution of state power in Russia, and about the broader trajectory of the Russian Revolution. And anyone who's been to Marxism knows that, if anything, we spend an inordinate amount of time discussing all those questions. But that's not where I want to start today, and I want to make an appeal to Michael, which is that in a very enjoyable meeting, which he thoroughly took control of in a remarkably anarchist way, yesterday he's produced various quotations from Lenin and Trotsky to prove how awful Bolshevism and Leninism was. And I'd appeal to him not to spend too much of our time on producing those kind of essentially decontextualized quotations, not because I think that they aren't worthy of discussion in an appropriate context, but because I think tonight we should be discussing essentially our political principles and the principles that inform how we how we organise. And really what I want to say, my essential argument is that even if it didn't exist, even if Lenin had never been born or existed, even if the Bolsheviks had never existed, Leninism as a political practice would have to be invented today. What do I mean by Leninism? Perhaps I should say also that when I talk about Leninism, I'm not talking about what's sometimes called Marxism-Leninism, the distortion, the profound distortion of the revolutionary Marxist tradition, which became the state ideology, the state religion in countries like the Soviet Union, and which still is appealed to by various essentially Stalinist political parties around the world. What I mean by Leninism is something much more specific within the broader revolutionary Marxist tradition. And I mean by really two things. First of all, a recognition of the importance of political organisation. Marx is famous for talking about the unity of theory and practice. The philosophers have only interpreted the world, the point is to change it, and so on. But he had only a very vague idea of how that unity in practice would be achieved. The great Hungarian Marxist philosopher Georg Lukács pointed out that Lenin's breakthrough, one of the things that makes Lenin such an important figure in the Marxist tradition, was that he recognised the centrality of organisation as a political and theoretical problem for revolutionaries. Lukács himself wrote that organisation is the form of mediation between theory and practice. In other words, the only way in which political theories and abstract political analysis become operative, become testable, is when they're translated into organisational forms as part of a struggle for political and ideological influence. More than anyone else within the revolutionary Marxist tradition, Lenin grasped the importance of organisation. But secondly, the second thing that's distinctive to Leninism, in the sense I want to defend it this evening, is that it represents a particular understanding of the role of revolutionary political organisation. For us in the revolutionary Marxist tradition, socialist revolution is a process of self-emancipation. One of the finest statements of that is to be found in Lenin's little unfinished pamphlet, The State and Revolution. There's a very powerful presentation of revolution as a process that develops from below through the struggle and self-organisation of working people. But what Lenin also argued was that there's nothing automatic about the success of this process. One of the things that one can find if one looks at the history of socialist and working class movements for liberation over the last 200 years is many great struggles for self-emancipation, which are in the end defeated. There's nothing inevitable about this surge of self-organised struggle to liberate ourselves. There's nothing there's nothing inevitable about the success of such struggles. The reason for this, I think, is twofold. On the one hand, there's the pervasive influence of ruling class ideology put forward through the mass media, the education system, and so on. But there's also the broader effect of capitalist society in fragmenting the working class, making it passive, encouraging workers, even when they organise collectively, to confine the horizons of change within the framework of the existing system. And they also organise political forces, reformist political forces, in Europe, social democracy, in many parts of the world, trade union officialdom, the trade union bureaucracy, these days non-governmental organisations of various kinds, which seek to reinforce these self-limiting tendencies, to confine workers' struggles within the framework of the existing system. On the other hand, we have the fantastic concentration of power in the big corporations and ultimately in the state, with its coercive apparatuses, the army, the police, the intelligence services, even though often they're not, as is clear, in both Britain and the US, not very intelligent. We have this enormous concentration of power in the corporations and the state. The role